What is the weirdest situation that happened to you while asking adults to buy you alcohol, one that you will remember for the rest of your life? Some dude thought he could rob me like he did every other kid when I handed him money for alcohol, but he didn't know I wasn't like the others, that he had started a war that was going to cost him dearly. I was 17, angry at the world, and too broke to do anything about it. It was the kind of summer where the pavement cooked your shoes and the cicadas screamed so loud it felt like your brain was rattling around inside your skull. My mom was always working doubles trying to keep the lights on in our shoebox apartment, and I spent most days wandering town with pockets full of lint looking for something to do that didn't cost money I didn't have. That's how I ended up outside a Safeway one Friday night with a couple of friends, sitting on the curb, sweating through my shirt, and trying to look casual while we scoped out older people to buy us alcohol. Classic underage boredom, right? I wanted something cheap and cold, something that would make the heat and the shitty town feel a little less sharp for one night. We'd been there for almost an hour, getting ignored or told to fuck off by everyone who walked past, when these three older kids rolled up. They were maybe 18 or 19, the kind of local kings who'd graduated a year ago and were still hanging around town because they didn't have anywhere else to go. You know the type. The tall one was wearing a snapback backwards, tank top, and had a cheap chain around his neck. He had that look like he thought the world owed him something. With him was a short girl with dyed red hair, smoking a cigarette like she wanted people to look at her, and another dude who was round-faced and quiet, dragging his feet behind them. They looked at me, and I looked back, feeling that jolt of hope. I asked if they could help us out, trying to keep it cool, offering to toss them a few bucks for the trouble. The tall guy grinned and said, "Yeah, we got you, bro. What you want?" I told him I just wanted a 12-pack of cheap beer, and he nodded like it was no big deal. He told me to give him the money first, and I hesitated for half a second, something in me saying this wasn't a great idea, but it was hot. I was tired, and I wanted those beers. So I handed over the money, even told him he could keep the change if he came through. They walked into the store, and I felt that excited, jittery feeling in my chest, like I was on the edge of finally having a good night for once. I stood near the trash can, trying to look like I wasn't waiting for anything, checking my phone every 2 minutes, watching the automatic doors slide open and shut, people coming and going, none of them him. 5 minutes passed, then 10. I felt sweat dripping down the back of my neck, the sun sliding lower, that sticky golden hour making the world glow while my stomach started to drop. My friend mumbled, maybe they're just taking a while, but even he didn't sound like he believed it. Then, the red-haired girl came out alone, holding a lighter, flicking it open and closed. She looked at me for a second before walking over, avoiding eye contact. "Hey, he's not gonna get you your stuff," she said, like she was telling me about the weather. I blinked at her, trying to process it. "What, so he just took my money?" She nodded, eyes darting toward the parking lot where I saw the other two standing, pretending to check their phones near the corner of the building. "Yeah, he's not giving it back. But I felt bad, so if you give me a little more, I can get you some beers. Just a few to make it right." I should have walked away. I should have taken the L and gone home. But I was 17 and angry and stupid, and there was something in her eyes that made me believe her, like she was caught in the middle and actually felt guilty. I dug into my pockets and pulled out the last of my cash, just a couple of crumpled bills and change, and handed it over. She gave me a small smile, tucked the bills into her back pocket, and told me to wait by the side of the building where there weren't any cameras. "I'll drop them off in the bushes," she said, flicking her cigarette away. I stood there, trying not to look desperate, kicking gravel with my shoe, letting the hot breeze hit my face. For a second, I looked down at my phone, a cracked screen with 2% battery, just enough to see a text from my mom asking if I'd be home for dinner. I didn't reply. When I looked up, I saw the two guys slipping out from behind the store, laughing, crossing the street without even glancing back. My stomach dropped, and I realized I'd been played. They must have used her as cover walking around the building, waiting behind the dumpster while she scammed me a second time. I stood there for a second, just letting the anger wash over me, fists clenching so tight my knuckles went white. I could have walked away, should have walked away, but I didn't. I saw the girl step out from behind the bushes, holding a small plastic bag. She set it down and walked away without a word. Inside the bag were 3 warm beers, rolling around, clinking together like they were laughing at me too. I picked up the bag, cracked open one, and took a warm, bitter sip. Then I looked across the street at the trio, still laughing, walking away like nothing happened, like I was nothing, like they could do this to anyone and walk off into the sunset. And in that moment, something in me snapped. I started walking. I don't remember deciding to follow them. One moment I was standing there with the warm beer dripping down my wrist. The next I was crossing the street, every step echoing in my ears like I was walking into something I couldn't come back from. They didn't look back, not even once. That was the first mistake. I kept half a block behind, weaving between parked cars, ducking behind trash cans, my shoes crunching over loose gravel and broken glass that glittered under the streetlights. The sun was almost gone, the sky that bruised purple you only get in July, the air thick enough to choke you. My shirt clung to my back, and I could feel sweat dripping down the sides of my face, but I didn't care. They walked like people who owned the world, like nothing could touch them. The tall guy had this lazy swagger, shoulders rolling, jeans sagging just enough to show the waistband of his boxers. The girl would skip ahead sometimes, spinning around with her arms out like she was in a music video, her red hair catching what was left of the sunlight. The quiet one trailed behind, head down, hands shoved deep into his pockets, laughing at the tall guy's jokes. They cut across an empty lot behind a boarded-up gas station, the dry grass crunching under their feet. I hesitated for a second at the edge of the lot, remembering how my mom used to warn me to stay away from this place when I was a kid. She said it was where junkies went to shoot up, but tonight it was empty. just the ghosts of old oil stains and cigarette butts. I kept going. Halfway across the lot, I tripped over a chunk of concrete and nearly fell, the beers in the plastic bag clinking together loud enough to make me freeze. My heart jumped into my throat, and I crouched, scanning the lot, ready to bolt if any of them turned around. But they didn't even flinch. They were too busy with themselves to notice the kid trailing them like a shadow. They hit the sidewalk again, cutting through the park behind the community center. I followed, keeping to the tree line, my feet sinking into the soft dirt with each step. The swings creaked in the breeze, moving on their own, and the slide still had that one crack down the middle where some kid broke his arm years ago. I used to come here with my mom on her days off, back when she still had days off, pushing me on the swings while she hummed under her breath, her hair tied up, sunglasses hiding the tired in her eyes. It felt like another life. The girl ran ahead, hopping onto one of the swings, pumping her legs until she was almost horizontal before jumping off, landing with a thud on the sand. She laughed, brushing dirt off her shorts, flipping her hair over her shoulder. I could hear the tall guy telling her she was crazy, but he was smiling, lighting a cigarette, flicking the lighter open and closed. I crouched behind a trash can, watching them, the smell of stale beer and sweat mixing in my nose, the warm beer in my hand going flatter by the minute. My stomach growled, reminding me I hadn't eaten since breakfast, but I ignored it, focusing on them, on the way they moved, the way they didn't care. They left the park, taking the back path that led toward the high school, the path lined with chain-link fences on both sides, the pavement cracked with weeds pushing through, graffiti tags fading in the dusk. I followed, stepping over broken bottles and rusted cans, my shoes scuffing against the concrete, every sound amplified in the empty path. They stopped halfway down, the tall guy leaning against the fence, the girl standing in front of him, talking low enough that I couldn't hear. The quiet kid kicked at a rock, bouncing it off the fence, glancing around like he was bored. I pressed myself against the other side of the fence, gripping the metal, the coolness grounding me for a second. I thought about turning around. My mom was probably home by now, heating up leftovers, checking her phone, wondering why I wasn't answering. I could have gone home, crawled through the window, and cracked open one of the beers alone, letting the night fade like all the others. But I didn't. The tall guy kissed the girl, quick and sloppy, like he was showing off. She pulled back, smirking, wiping her mouth, and they both laughed. The quiet kid looked away, pretending not to see. I felt something sharp twist in my chest, something I couldn't name, like I was watching a world I'd never get to be part of. They moved again, and I followed. They passed the high school, cutting through the parking lot, the lampposts buzzing to life, moths swarming the orange glow. The girl climbed onto the concrete barriers, balancing with her arms out, the tall guy reaching up to grab her ankle, making her squeal and hop down. The quiet kid checked his phone, the screen lighting up his face, making him look younger, scared. They kept walking, the tall guy tossing his cigarette onto the pavement, stepping on it with a casual twist of his shoe. The streetlights flickered above them, the shadows dancing around their feet. I stayed in the dark, keeping my distance, every step calculated, my breath steady, my eyes locked on them. They turned onto a residential street, the houses small and close together, chain-link fences and old cars parked half on the sidewalks. I recognized the area, the part of town where the lawns were cut but the paint peeled, where every driveway had oil stains, and the kids rode bikes with one hand holding the handlebars and the other clutching cheap sodas. They stopped in front of a blue house with a sagging porch and a dead porch light. The front yard was patchy with dirt, a deflated basketball resting in the corner. A beat-up Honda Civic was parked in the driveway, one of the doors slightly open, a towel caught in the trunk. The tall guy dug into his pocket for keys, the girl leaning against the porch railing, scrolling on her phone, the quiet kid standing awkwardly at the bottom of the steps. I stopped across the street, half hidden behind a tree, breathing hard, my hands sweaty around the beer can. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it would give me away, but they didn't look over. They were too busy laughing, too sure of themselves. The tall guy said something to the quiet kid, who just nodded, looking down at his shoes. The girl snorted, pushing off the railing, heading up the steps. The front door opened, a warm yellow light spilling onto the porch for a second, before closing again, swallowing them in the dark. I stood there, the world suddenly too quiet. A dog barked down the street, and a TV played somewhere behind one of the closed windows, the muffled voices of a sitcom laugh track floating into the night. I could have turned around, I could have walked home, but I didn't. I walked across the street, up the cracked driveway, past the beat-up Honda with the towel in the trunk, the metal still warm under my fingers as I brushed against it. I walked up to the porch, the boards creaking under my weight, the smell of stale cigarettes hanging in the air. I raised my hand and knocked on the door. I stood on their porch, the boards creaking beneath me, the warm breeze pushing the faint smell of stale weed and hot asphalt around us. I could hear a dog barking somewhere down the street, and the low hum of a window AC unit straining against the July heat. For the first time that night, a flicker of fear cut through the anger that had kept me moving. The porch light was dead, but light leaked around the curtains in the front window, and I could see shapes moving inside. The tall guy pacing, the girl's shadow crossing and uncrossing her arms, the quiet kid slumped on the couch. Their voices were muffled, broken occasionally by a sharp laugh from the girl, high and cold. I knocked, each rap of my knuckles sending vibrations up my arm, louder than I intended. For a second, there was silence, the air heavy around me, the cicadas screaming in the trees like a warning. Then the door yanked open. It was him, the tall guy. He filled the doorway, his cheap chain glinting, a fresh red mark on his neck from where he'd been scratching. For a second, his eyes flicked over me, confused, like he was trying to place me. Then recognition hit, and his face twisted into that smirk I had seen earlier. "The fuck?" he said, letting out a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "Yo, you're that kid from the store." I didn't move. I didn't smile. I just looked at him, beer in hand, the plastic bag with the other 2 cans crinkling as I shifted my grip. Yeah? I said, voice low. You still gonna get me that beer you promised? His eyebrows shot up, and then he threw his head back, laughing for real this time, turning to shout back into the house. Yo, this kid followed us home. You believe this shit? I could see the girl now, leaning in the doorway behind him, her red hair tied up in a messy knot, a vape in her hand, blowing clouds into the ceiling. Her eyes were sharp, bright in the low light, but they flickered when she looked at me. The quiet kid peeked over the tall guy's shoulder, then quickly ducked back, as if afraid to be seen. The tall guy turned back to me, stepping closer, his shadow swallowing mine. You got a death wish, kid? You for real followed us all the way here for a few beers? You're fucking stupid. Maybe, I said, shrugging, trying to keep my voice steady, even though my chest was tight. Or maybe you're just a coward who scams people and hides behind your friends. His jaw clenched, his nostrils flaring, and I could see the way his hand twitched at his side, like he was deciding if I was worth hitting. Bro, get the f off my porch before you regret it, he said, his voice dropping, low and dangerous now. I ain't giving you shit, and you ain't getting your money back. I lifted the beer, cracked it open with a hiss that felt louder than the cicadas, foam bubbling over the top and dripping onto my fingers. I lifted it, took a slow sip, and wiped my mouth with the back of my hand, staring at him the entire time. Call the cops then, I said. Go ahead. The girl let out a low whistle, shaking her head, her eyes glinting like she was enjoying the show. Kyle, just leave him, she drawled, blowing another cloud of vapor past his head. He's just a kid. Kyle, so that was his name. He ignored her, stepping closer so we were almost nose to nose, and I could smell the cheap vape juice, stale sweat, and the faint burn of weed clinging to him. His eyes were bloodshot, and up close, I could see the small scabs on his knuckles. You think you're tough, huh? Kyle spat, his lip curling. Think you can just come to my house, drink on my porch, and talk shit? You're a joke. His finger jabbed into my chest, hard enough to sting, pushing me back half a step. The bag with the beers swung at my side, the cans clinking together. I could feel the burn in my throat, the rage boiling under my skin, mixing with the fear. I stepped forward again, closing the distance he had created, forcing him to look me in the eyes. You done? I asked quietly. His mouth opened, but no words came out. For a second, it was just us, breathing heavy, the air buzzing between us. The girl laughed, short and sharp, breaking the tension. She pushed off the doorframe, slipping past him and hopping down the steps, landing next to me. She smelled like cheap perfume and vape juice, her eyes scanning my face, searching for something. Yo, chill, she said, flicking Kyle in the chest. You're gonna scare the kid. He ain't worth it. Shut up, Ash, Kyle snapped, but his eyes didn't leave mine. He was waiting for me to flinch, to break eye contact, to give him a reason to shove me off the porch, but I didn't. Get the f out of here before I make you, he finally said, stepping back, spitting on the ground near my feet. I took another slow sip of the beer, letting it dribble down my chin, ignoring the warmth sliding under my shirt. I placed the can carefully on the porch railing, the condensation leaving a wet ring on the cracked paint. I'm done, I said softly. I turned, walking down the steps, my shoes thudding on the wood, each step heavy. I could feel their eyes on my back, waiting for me to run, to look back, to flinch, but I didn't. I reached the bottom of the steps and turned to face the driveway, looking at the car sitting there under the streetlight. The beat-up Honda Civic looked like it had seen better days, the paint dull, a dent in the passenger door, the towel still sticking out of the trunk like a white flag. One of the doors was slightly ajar, the metal catching the orange glow of the streetlight, reflecting it like an invitation. Behind me, I heard the screen door creak open, then slam shut. Footsteps on the porch, the floorboards protesting under Kyle's weight. You better walk away, kid, he called out, his voice dripping with fake calm. Last warning! I didn't turn around. I reached out and touched the hood of the car, the metal still warm from the sun, the surface gritty under my fingers. I tried the passenger door. It opened with a soft click. The smell of stale fast food, cheap cologne, and sweat rushed out to meet me, and I swallowed it down, feeling it settle in my lungs. There were wrappers on the floor, a crushed soda can in the cup holder, and a lanyard with keys swinging from the ignition, tapping softly against the steering column in the still air. I glanced back at the house, and for a split second, I saw the curtain in the front window shift, a shadow moving behind it. Good. I moved around to the driver's side and tried the handle. It was unlocked, and in that moment something cold and sharp slid over the anger, quieting it, focusing it. The driver's door opened with a quiet sigh, like the car itself was tired of him. I stood there for a moment, the door hanging open, the dome light flickering to life, illuminating the stained seats, the dirt ground into the floor mats, the empty bottles rattling when I nudged them with my foot. The smell hit me again, stale weed, fast food, sweat, and the sharp tang of cheap cologne that tried and failed to cover it all up. The night was quiet, the cicadas screaming in the trees, the only witness as I stood there, breathing hard, feeling the blood pound in my ears. I could still hear Kyle's voice in my head, that laugh, that dismissive look he gave me when he realized he could take what he wanted and walk away. No consequences, no fear. Not tonight. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my house key, cold and sharp between my fingers. I tested the point against my thumb, felt it bite, just enough to draw a tiny bead of blood, bright red in the yellow glow of the dome light. Good. I leaned in and popped the glove box open, ignoring the random napkins and old receipts that spilled out onto the passenger seat. I reached under the seat, grabbing whatever I could find. Loose change, a half-empty lighter, a cheap sunglasses case. I tossed it all onto the driveway, each item landing with a soft clatter. I moved to the back door and opened it, the hinges creaking. Inside were fast food bags, an old hoodie, and a crumpled backpack that smelled like sweat and cheap cologne. I dumped it out onto the grass, letting everything spill, shaking the bag to make sure nothing was left. Behind me, the street was still empty, the houses dark, the glow of a TV in a window across the street flickering like a distant heartbeat. No one was coming out. No one was stopping me. I stood looking at the car under the streetlight, breathing hard, the key in my hand. Then I pressed the tip to the hood. The sound it made was soft, almost gentle, like a whisper. As I dragged the key down the length of the hood, leaving a long, jagged line in the dull paint, I pulled back and did it again, pressing harder, letting the key bite deep into the metal, the sound harsher this time. Louder, satisfying in a way that made something deep in my chest unclench. I moved around to the side, dragging the key across the passenger door, the metal-on-metal scream cutting through the night. I scratched lines down the side, cross-hatching them, making sure there was no angle where it wouldn't be seen. I stepped back, breathing hard, sweat dripping down my forehead, the key warm in my hand now. I moved to the trunk where the towel was still sticking out. I yanked it out and tossed it aside, leaving it in the dirt. I scratched the trunk too, deep, deliberate lines, carving my anger into the metal so it would stay there, a permanent reminder. My chest was tight, my breathing shallow, but I wasn't done yet. I spit on the back window, watching it slide down the glass, leaving a smear that caught the streetlight just right. And then, for a second, everything was quiet. I stood there looking at the damage, at the car that would never look the same again. The anger in me finally cooling, replaced by something else, something close to satisfaction. But as I stood there, I heard it, the screen door slamming open. What the f— His voice was sharp, slicing through the quiet night, followed by the rapid thud of footsteps on the porch. I turned, and there he was, Kyle, standing at the top of the steps, his eyes wide, mouth open, hands clenched at his sides. Behind him, the girl stood in the doorway, one hand over her mouth, the other clutching the doorframe, eyes wide with shock and something else. Fear, maybe, or excitement, I couldn't tell. The quiet kid was behind her, half hidden, his eyes darting between me, the car, and Kyle. Kyle took a step forward, his face red, veins standing out in his neck. "Are you fucking insane?" I didn't move. I didn't run. I just looked at him, letting him see what he had made me into. "Call the cops," I said, my voice calm, steady, almost quiet. "Go ahead." His face twisted, rage and disbelief mixing, his hands clenching and unclenching like he couldn't decide if he wanted to hit me or grab his phone. "You're dead," he hissed, stepping down another step. "You're dead, you piece of shit." "Maybe," I said, shrugging. "But now you're out a paint job." He screamed, an inarticulate animal sound, and lunged down the steps toward me. I dropped the key, letting it hit the driveway with a metallic clatter, and stepped back, raising my hands, ready to run, to fight, to do whatever came next. But before he could reach me, the girl's voice cut through the night. "Kyle, stop!" He froze, turning to look at her, his chest heaving, his eyes wild. "Don't," she said, her voice shaking, her hand still gripping the doorframe. "It's not worth it." He turned back to me, his face twisting, and for a second I thought he would ignore her, that he would come for me anyway. But he didn't. He stood there, breathing hard, glaring at me, his hands shaking. "Get the fuck out of here," he finally said, his voice low, dangerous. Before I changed my mind, I didn't say anything. I just turned, slowly, and started walking down the driveway, past the car with its new scars, past the spilled backpack and the towel in the dirt, past the girl who was watching me with wide eyes and parted lips. I didn't run. I didn't look back. I walked down the street, each step steady, my breathing slowing as I put distance between me and that house, that car, that moment. I could still hear him behind me, shouting, cursing, the sound of him kicking something, maybe the car, maybe the porch railing, maybe the ground itself, unable to do anything else. I turned the corner and the street swallowed me, the darkness wrapping around me like a blanket, the cicadas buzzing, the world moving on like nothing had happened. I closed the apartment door behind me quietly, easing it shut so it wouldn't rattle in the frame. The lock clicked softly, final, like the last period at the end of a sentence. The living room was dark except for the glow of the microwave clock, its blue numbers blinking 12:37 a.m. The place smelled like laundry detergent and the faint tang of the leftover pasta my mom must have made for dinner. A single plate was on the counter, plastic wrap over it, a note tucked underneath. "Eat if you're hungry. Love you." I stood there for a moment, letting the words settle, letting the smallness of the apartment wrap around me like a blanket. The hum of the refrigerator, the drip of the kitchen faucet, the soft rush of a car outside on the street below. All of it felt louder than it should. I moved to the bathroom and clicked on the light, blinking against the harshness of it. My reflection looked back at me from the cracked mirror, sweat-damp hair sticking to my forehead, a streak of dirt on my cheek, dried beer on the collar of my shirt. My eyes looked different, darker somehow, but clearer. I splashed cold water on my face, letting it drip into the sink, watching the rivulets slide down the porcelain, twisting and merging before disappearing down the drain. I rubbed at the dirt on my cheek, the cold seeping into my skin, grounding me, reminding me I was here, that it was over, that I had done it. I looked up, meeting my own eyes again, and for a moment I didn't feel small. I left the bathroom and went to my room, the door creaking on its hinges, the air inside stale from being closed all day. The glow-in-the-dark stars I had put up years ago still clung to the ceiling, faintly glowing, a reminder of the kid I had been, of the kid I had to leave behind too early. I dropped the plastic bag with the empty beer cans into the small trash bin by my desk, pushing them down under some old homework papers. My backpack was on the floor, unzipped, books spilling out, a half-finished essay sticking out like a scab I didn't want to pick at. I sat on the edge of my bed, letting my shoulders drop, the springs creaking under my weight. I could still feel the vibration of the key in my hand as it scraped down the side of the car, the resistance of the metal, the scream it made, the way it felt like I was dragging all the anger and humiliation and smallness out of myself and leaving it there in those deep, jagged lines. I pulled off my shoes, dropping them to the floor, the thud muffled by the thin carpet. My socks were damp with sweat, the soles of my feet aching from how far I had walked. I stretched them, flexing my toes, letting the cool air touch my skin. I lay back, staring up at the ceiling, tracing the patterns of the stars, the shapes I had made as a kid to help me sleep at night. A dog barked outside, the sound distant, followed by the low rumble of a car driving by. Somewhere down the hall, a toilet flushed, water rushing through the pipes in the walls. The world kept moving. I closed my eyes, letting the darkness settle over me, the images of the night playing behind my eyelids. The look on Kyle's face when he opened the door, the way the metal screamed under the key, the spit sliding down the window, the way the porch light had never turned on. I thought about the way Kyle had looked at me when he realized what I had done, the way his voice had cracked, the way he had screamed and cursed, helpless, angry, afraid. I thought about the girl, the way she had watched, silent, her eyes darting between us, not saying a word until it was too late. And I thought about how, for once, I hadn't backed down. I hadn't let him win. I hadn't let him laugh and walk away. I thought about my mom, about how tired she always was, about how she tried so hard to keep things together, about how she would be disappointed if she knew what I had done. I thought about how I would feel if she looked at me with that look in her eyes, the one that hurt more than any scream ever could. But I didn't regret it, not even a little. Because for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had control. Like I wasn't just another kid getting walked over by someone bigger, someone louder, someone who thought the world owed them everything. I fell asleep like that, the faint glow of the stars on my ceiling watching over me, the sound of the city outside the window, a soft lullaby, the weight of the night slowly fading, replaced by something else. Something like peace. I woke up the next morning to the sound of birds outside the window and the soft creak of the floorboards in the hallway as my mom moved around, getting ready for her shift at the diner. The smell of coffee drifted under the door, warm and comforting, mixing with the faint scent of the leftover pasta she had left out for me. I stayed in bed for a while, listening to her hum under her breath as she moved around the kitchen, the clink of her spoon against the coffee mug, the rustle of her jacket as she slipped it on. When she knocked on my door, it was soft, careful. "You up, baby?" she asked, her voice tired but warm. "Yeah," I called back, sitting up, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. She opened the door, peeking in, her hair tied up in a messy bun, her eyes lined with exhaustion but still bright. She smiled when she saw me, and it was real, and it hurt in a way that made me want to cry. "There's coffee if you want it," she said. "I gotta get going, but I'll be back by 3. "Okay," I said, my voice small, the weight of what I had done pressing against me, but not in a way that made me wish I could take it back. She looked at me for a moment, her eyes scanning my face, searching for something. Maybe a lie, maybe a truth I hadn't said out loud. Then she nodded, smiling again. "Love you," she said. "Love you too," I said. She closed the door quietly, and I heard her shoes on the floor, the door opening, the sound of her keys jangling, and then the soft click of the door shutting behind her. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The apartment suddenly quiet again, the ticking of the clock on the wall the only sound. I got up, moving to the kitchen, pouring myself a cup of coffee, letting the warmth seep into my hands, into my chest, grounding me. I moved to the window, pulling back the curtain, looking out over the street below, the sunlight painting the pavement in warm gold, the world waking up, moving on. Forgetting. I wondered what Kyle's morning looked like. I wondered if he woke up and saw the scratches on his car, the spit on the window, the mess in his driveway. I wondered if he screamed, if he punched the wall, if he tried to scrub it off, realizing he couldn't. I wondered if he would think twice before scamming another kid, before laughing at someone who couldn't fight back. I took a sip of my coffee, the bitterness grounding me, the warmth reminding me I was alive. And I smiled, because for once I didn't feel small. 3 days later, I saw her again. I was at the corner store a few blocks from home, one of those cramped places that smelled like stale coffee and cleaning chemicals, with dusty racks of chips and a fridge that rattled every time someone opened it. I was there to get a soda and a pack of gum, something to kill the taste of cheap coffee and cheap adrenaline that still lingered in my mouth every morning when I woke up. I wasn't thinking about him, about Kyle, about the car. Not really. The memory was there, sure. The vibration of the key in my hand, the way the paint curled under the pressure, the look on his face. It was there, tucked under everything else. A steady, quiet hum. But I wasn't thinking about it when I stepped inside, letting the cold air from the fridge hit my face as I grabbed a soda, the condensation dripping onto my fingers, grounding me. And then I saw her. She was at the counter buying a pack of cigarettes and a cheap lighter, her red hair pulled back in a loose ponytail, a black hoodie hanging off one shoulder, shorts that showed bruises on her thighs. Her phone was in her hand, thumb scrolling, not really reading, just moving. For a second, I thought about turning around, slipping out before she saw me, letting her walk out of my life without another word. But I didn't. I stepped into line behind her, letting the fridge door shut with a soft thump, the sound loud in the quiet store. The cashier, a middle-aged guy with tired eyes, scanned her cigarettes, calling out the total in a flat voice. She dug into her pocket for crumpled bills, dropping a few coins on the counter, her hands shaking just a little, barely enough to notice if you weren't looking. But I was looking. She glanced up, handing over the bills, and her eyes met mine. For a moment, everything went still. Her eyes widened, Just a fraction, recognition flickering across her face, her lips parting like she was going to say something. Then it was gone, replaced by something else, something tired and resigned, as she looked back down at her phone, pretending to scroll, pretending I wasn't there. The cashier handed her the change, and she mumbled a thanks before turning. Stepping around me, her eyes locked on the door, on the freedom just a few feet away. But she stopped. Just before she reached the door, she turned her head, her eyes finding mine again, holding them for a second. A question there, unspoken, heavy. I didn't say anything. Neither did she. She nodded once, barely there, like a ghost of a gesture before she pushed the door open, the bell above it ringing softly, the cold morning air sweeping in for a moment before the door swung shut behind her. I stood there, the soda in my hand dripping water onto the floor, my heart beating steady in my chest. Not fast, not slow. Just steady. The cashier cleared his throat, pulling me back, and I stepped forward, setting the soda and gum on the counter, digging into my pocket for the last of my cash. You know her? The cashier asked, his voice casual, uninterested, like he didn't really care but needed to fill the silence. I thought about it. Did I? No, I said, shaking my head. He nodded, like that was the answer he expected, handing me my change, the coins clinking in my hand, cold and small. I stepped outside, the morning sun sharp and bright, the air cool against my skin. She was gone, already swallowed by the street, by the day, by whatever came next. I opened the soda, the hiss loud in the quiet, and took a long sip, letting the cold bite of it settle on my tongue, washing away the last taste of stale coffee. I started walking, letting the sun warm my face, the world moving around me, cars passing, people laughing, a dog barking in the distance. Everything normal, everything moving, everything alive. But something was different. I was different. Later that day, I found myself near the park, the one with the cracked slide and the swings that creaked in the breeze. Kids were playing, screaming with laughter, the sound sharp and bright, echoing through the warm air. I sat on the swings for a while, letting the chains creak, letting the movement soothe something restless in me. I watched the clouds move across the sky, slow and lazy, the blue so bright it almost hurt to look at. I thought about Kyle, about the car, about the scratches that would never really go away, about the spit on the window, about the way he screamed when he realized he couldn't control everything. I thought about the girl, the way she had looked at me, the way she had nodded, the way she had walked away without a word. And I thought about me, about who I was before that day, about who I was now. I didn't feel guilty, I didn't feel proud either. I just felt right, like the world had settled into place, like I had found the edge of something sharp and used it to carve out a space for myself in a world that had been too small for too long. The sun was warm on my skin, the swing rocking gently, the world moving, alive, vibrant. I pulled the last can of beer from my backpack, the one I had saved, warm now. But it didn't matter. I cracked it open, the hiss quiet under the sound of the wind in the trees, under the laughter of the kids, under the steady beat of my own heart. I took a sip, letting it settle on my tongue, letting it wash over me, grounding me, and I smiled, because for the first time I didn't need anyone else to buy me a drink. Not anymore.